Archaeologists were looking for the long-lost tomb of Cleopatra when they found something that seemed too good to be real. Roughly 43 feet underground beneath a ruined Egyptian temple, there was a perfectly straight tunnel, carved through solid sandstone. The tunnel is over 4,200 feet long, and so precise that experts called it a geometric miracle. The tunnel sits beneath an ancient city west of Alexandria, near Egypt's Mediterranean coast. The team that found it carefully peeled back layers of stone and debris until they hit this passage, about 6.5 feet tall, cut cleanly into bedrock. There were no collapse marks or wandering curves, just precision. If you've ever tried to drill a straight hole into a wall at home and failed within seconds, imagine doing this underground for nearly a mile. Ancient builders had no GPS, no lasers, no modern surveying tools. Yet, this tunnel stays remarkably level over its entire length. That means they understood gradients, angles, and distance in a way that goes far beyond stack stones and hope. Engineers today rely on machines to maintain that kind of accuracy underground. These people relied on knowledge, repetition, and patience. Parts of the tunnel now sit underwater or collapsed, probably after several earthquakes that struck the region centuries ago. Some experts think the tunnel may have once connected the temple to water sources or ritual areas closer to the sea. Archaeologists noticed that the Egyptian tunnel is an exact replica of the Villena tunnel in Greece. It's believed to be one of the most important engineering achievements of antiquity, which only makes the Egyptian tunnel more special. Underground passages in ancient Greece linked temples to sacred springs. Back in ancient times, people moved through space in specific ways, underground and above, to reenact myths and journeys of gods. A tunnel like this could represent a path to the underworld, rebirth, or divine transition. Nobody would invest this much effort in construction just for decoration. Plus, in earlier digs at the site, archaeologists pulled up all kinds of artifacts, including coins with the names and faces of Cleopatra VII and Alexander the Great. They also found figurines, statues of deities, a mummy with a gold tongue, and even an entire cemetery packed with Greco-Roman style mummies. The perfect geometric tunnel isn't an isolated flex. Not far away, underwater archaeologists off the coast of Alexandria uncovered something that sounds like it belongs in a royal travel documentary. A 2,000-year-old pleasure boat that once glided along the Nile. And this wasn't just another fishing vessel or cargo barge. It likely stretched over 115 feet long and 23 feet wide, and had a decorated cabin, plus around 20 rowers, which turned the river into a moving palace. This isn't speculation pulled out of thin air. An ancient Greek geographer named Strabo wrote about these exact boats around the 1st century BCE. He described lavish vessels used by royalty during festivals and ceremonial outings in Alexandria. For years, historians treated that as a poetic exaggeration. Then, this wreck surfaced, and suddenly, Strabo sounded less like a storyteller and more like a witness. Even ancient art backs it up. The Palestrina mosaic from Italy shows richly decorated boats floating down the Nile. They match both the texts and the physical evidence almost perfectly. Inside the wreck, archaeologists found something small but incredibly human. Graffiti scratched into the wood in Greek. Just writing left behind by someone who stood on that deck 2,000 years ago. Researchers haven't fully decoded the text yet, but its existence alone matters. It tells us this wasn't just a floating symbol of power. People lived on it. It was sort of like a modern luxurious yacht, and the Nile was like a highway. All types of vessels with passengers were moving back and forth, visiting friends, carrying their goods for trade, doing business, and, of course, going on pleasure cruises. The location of the pleasure boat makes the story even better. The boat sat near the temple of Isis on Antirodos, an island that once hosted royal and religious buildings before earthquakes and rising seas erased it from the surface. That temple collapsed around 50 CE, and researchers believe the boat may have sunk during the same disaster. Another recent find that has to do with life on the Nile is the lower part of the massive worship complex about 10 miles southwest of Cairo. It connects directly to an upper temple dedicated to Ra, the Egyptian deity of the sun. The newly excavated part is a 4,500-year-old valley temple. The upper temple sits on higher ground, and archaeologists excavated it years ago. The valley temple is closer to the Nile, and it's connected to the upper part by a causeway. A German Egyptologist actually started excavating part of the temple back in 1901, but the groundwater sat much higher then, and he had to stop. Now, the groundwater level is lower, and a modern team has managed to excavate about half of the Valley Temple since 2024. Once they got in, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a columned entrance portico. Then they found blocks carved with a calendar of religious events, almost like an ancient public schedule. The text includes feasts for Sokar, a falcon-headed deity linked to Memphis, which was a major capital during the Old Kingdom, plus the Festival of Min, a fertility deity, and even the Procession of Ra. The calendar blocks all showed up around the entrance portico area, which most definitely means that the outside facade of the temple displayed this long feast calendar publicly. That's why archaeologists think this might be one of the earliest examples of a true public calendar ever found. A literal event list for an entire community, built into the architecture. On top of that, the team found dozens of decorated blocks covered in inscriptions that named a pharaoh who ruled around 2420 to 2389 BCE and had the temple built. This temple shows how people moved through ancient Egypt. Because the upper temple handled the main worship, but the valley temple made the whole place accessible. It acted like the landing area for boats coming in, either directly from the Nile or more likely from one of its side channels. So instead of hiking across desert terrain, visitors could arrive by water, step onto the temple's landing stage, enter through the Valley Temple, then head up the causeway ramp toward the upper temple on the hill. After about a century of use, researchers found that the Valley Temple had been repurposed into a residential area. And the best part is, what they found from that era: 2 wooden pieces used for playing Senet, an ancient board game. Senet shows up at other Egyptian sites too, including King Tutankhamun's tomb, but nobody fully agrees on the rules today. Some discoveries in Egypt create new mysteries instead of solving the old ones. Earlier in 2025, archaeologists announced the discovery of the first pharaoh's burial found in or near the Valley of Kings since King Tut's tomb in 1922. The newly found tomb of Thutmose II flooded almost immediately after burial. Ancient officials rushed in, removed the mummy and most of the grave goods, and hid them somewhere else. The weirdest part is that an alabaster ointment jar inside the tomb links the burial directly to Hatshepsut, Thutmose II's wife and half-sister. The inscription basically says she made this monument for him, which proves she arranged his burial. But it still doesn't explain why she placed him here and later chose the Valley of the Kings for herself. Now, archaeologists are studying a huge mound of rubble near the tomb, about 75 feet tall, and suspect it was built to hide something important. If a second tomb sits underneath, it could be complete and undisturbed. So, the deeper the archaeologists dig, the more ancient Egypt stops feeling like a gone civilization and starts feeling like a paused one. Looks like it didn't just survive time, it outsmarted it, and we're only just beginning to catch up. This coffin seems to defy logic. No visible openings, no way in or out, and yet, inside lies Lady Chanet-Aa, a mysterious woman from ancient Egypt, perfectly preserved even after 3,000 years. How did she get there? It was the third intermediate period in Egypt, a time between great dynasties. Pharaohs wore the blue crowns. Priests in Thebes were almost as powerful as kings. Markets were filled with the cries of merchants selling dates, papyrus, and precious perfumes. Lady Chanet-Aa was in her late 30s or early 40s, old age by Egyptian standards of that time. Like other Egyptians at the time, she ate meals of bread, lentils, and fish. By that age, her teeth were already badly worn down, yellowish with enamel eroded,
because food in ancient Egypt often had grains of sand in it. But she wasn't just a regular woman. When she passed away for unknown reasons, her burial was lavish. Locals wrapped her body in expensive linen and adorned with artificial eyes to replace her real ones that would help her see in the afterlife. And that's exactly how we found her 3,000 years later, in a beautifully decorated sarcophagus. It was made of cartonnage, which is kind of like papier-mâché, made by layering linen and papyrus with adhesive. These coffins were wildly strong, lasting for thousands of years, all thanks to Egypt's super dry climate. But most importantly, Egyptians only used it for the elite. So she was someone very important to the locals, though we might never know why. But there was only one huge problem with her mummy. How did they even put her in the coffin? No matter how much researchers looked, there were simply no entry points. The only visible gap was a tiny slit near her feet. But that's not nearly large enough to place her entire body inside. This mystery puzzled them for decades, until they finally learned the truth only recently. They study those mummies at the Field Museum in Chicago using new technology, CT scans. It's basically like taking thousands of X-rays and piecing them together to create detailed 3D images. That's how we can learn more about the bodies without disturbing them. And it turns out the ancient Egyptians were unbelievably clever. They didn't construct the cartonnage around Chanet-Aa's body, which would be a common and easy thing to do. Instead, embalmers created the coffin first. Then, they softened this coffin with moisture to make it flexible. After that, they carefully molded it around her wrapped body. They did cut a slit along the back of the coffin to do that, but then they laced it up like a corset, so it seemed like there were no openings. Finally, they secured a wooden panel at her feet to keep everything in place. That's where the tiny slit came from. Usually, the insides were removed and put in jars, symbolically guarded by the 4 sons of Horus. Egyptians believed that the deceased would need all that stuff once they got into the afterlife. They also thought it would help preserve the body for ages, which, as we can see, worked amazingly well. Thanks to their beliefs, we now have mummies as time capsules. Each son of Horus was supposed to protect each of the specific body parts. The human-headed Imseti for the liver, the baboon-headed Hapi for the lungs, the jackal-headed Dalmatef for the stomach, and the falcon-headed Kebis Senuf for the intestines. It's crazy how much effort the embalmers put into their job, especially in Lady Chanet-Aa. They wanted to make sure her body remains untouched and the sarcophagus would be perfect for her. You can't help but wonder, who was she if she mattered so much? The ancient Egyptians literally viewed the afterlife as modern retirement planning. You're not just passing away, you gotta prepare yourself for it. Prepare the body, eyes to see, and so on. And the richer or more important you were, the better your afterlife would be. But Chanet-Aa wasn't the only fascinating mummy they studied. They also decided to scan Harwa, an Egyptian man who lived around the same time. Judging by the mummy, he also had a high social status. His mummy revealed no signs of hard labor and his teeth were well kept, which means he enjoyed some high-quality food without tons of sand in it. Some fellas got lucky both in life and after it. But there were many mysterious mummies throughout history. One of them is Chin-Tsu, also known as Lady Dai. The story of her began in 1968. Some workers near Changsha, China, were digging an air raid shelter for a hospital. But suddenly, they accidentally uncovered an ancient burial site. They came down there and stumbled upon something incredible. 3 tombs belonging to a noblewoman, her husband, and a young man believed to be their son. She was a noblewoman from ancient China, and she had a fascinating backstory. She lived over 2,000 years ago during the Western Han Dynasty. She was married to Li Kang, a guy who served as chancellor to the Changsha Kingdom, a high-ranking official. At first, it looks like Lady Dai lived a life of luxury and privilege. She had private musicians to play at her parties, and for her personal enjoyment. She probably played the guqin, an instrument that back in the day people associated with intellect and elegance. And she certainly ate like an empress. Fine meats, delicacies, and all things like that. Even her wardrobe was full of some exquisite silk, not even mentioning the tons of cosmetics. But all this wealth came at a cost. The more she aged, the worse her health became. She got a full pack: a heart condition, diabetes, high pressure, and liver issues. It also looks like her back was driving her crazy, probably making it hard for her to even move. Finally, as a cherry on top, she developed gallstones. All this packed together eventually led to a heart attack that took her life around the age of 50. There was one haunting detail. Scientists found over 130 melon seeds in her stomach and intestines. Most likely, she ate watermelon just hours before she passed away, which means it was probably during summer when the fruit was ripe. She enjoyed a sweet, simple treat before her life was cut short. The excavation began in 1972, and this wasn't easy at all. Over 1,500 local students had to help. And Lady Dai was the most mysterious one. She was buried in 4 rectangular pine boxes, one inside the other like a Matryoshka doll, all wrapped in 20 layers of silk, and all that sealed with lots of charcoal and white clay. The coffins were painted beautifully as well, adorned with protective deities, mythical animals, and clouds which symbolized the heavens. There were drawings of divine creatures and Mount Kunlun. The myth said that on this mountain, people reach eternal happiness. All this told us a lot about the Han Dynasty, their beliefs about afterlife, art, daily lives, and their remarkable craftsmanship. And then researchers finally got to the body. It was astonishing. Soft skin, joints that could still bend, and in general, she was almost intact. She even kept her hair, eyelashes, fingerprints, and even traces of blood. It's like she literally passed away only a few weeks ago. Ancient people used a very clever technique to preserve her. It looks like embalmers put her into some weird, mysterious acidic liquid. This liquid prevented bacteria from growing. Unfortunately, it also gave rashes to all the scientists that touched Lady Dai. And this rash lasted for 3 months. And you know what they buried together with her? Over 1,400 artifacts, mostly personal stuff like silk clothes, cosmetics, and musical instruments. Even food, grains, meats, wine, and pastries. There were also 162 carved wooden figurines of various servants and musicians. It's possible that they were either just there to service her even in the afterlife, or maybe based on her actual servants.
For over 3,000 years, no one knew this place even existed. And then, out of nowhere, archaeologists digging near Alexandria uncovered something absolutely shocking: a forgotten Egyptian city. This place is buried under Greek ruins, hiding secrets that could rewrite the history of pharaohs and their armies. And one of the artifacts, which looks like a simple wine jug, changed everything. We thought that we already placed all the important parts on the map of ancient Egypt: pyramids, Thebes, Luxor, Alexandria. But nope, the map just got an update. The new city was a big deal, and it's about 3,400 years old. It's just been discovered at the site called Kom el Nugus. This place is located west of Alexandria and tucked between the Mediterranean and a saltwater lake called Lake Mariut. This discovery raised a few eyebrows. Scientists thought that this place used to be empty and that it was only settled by the Greeks in about 332 BCE. But it turns out that people lived in Kom el Nugus way before that. When archaeologists were digging through Greek ruins, they started noticing something unexpected: mud brick walls. Yep, you know, the pyramid type. That's the kind Egyptians built during the New Kingdom. These mud bricks were made from mud, clay, sand, and straw. These ingredients were mixed with water and dried in the sun, not baked. Egyptians used them for thousands of years to build houses, temples, palaces, and yes, the pyramids. Of course, other civilizations did use mud brick too, but Egyptian mud brick is kinda quirky. They used straw that grew in their regions, layout styles, and mortar. That's what helped the experts realize that Egyptians used to hang out in Qom el-Nugus. That alone raised eyebrows, and then they found more. An entire street layout, buried structures, and even a temple built by Ramses the Great himself. His name speaks for itself. This guy was one of the most famous pharaohs in all of Egyptian history. He ruled ancient Egypt for 60 years, fought huge battles, and just loved building tons of stuff like that temple. People loved him so much that later pharaohs literally pretended to be him or wrote his name on their buildings. That's when archaeologists realized that they weren't looking at some dusty mud bricks of a tiny village. That's an entire buried city. They immediately started digging more. Turns out the whole place wasn't random. It was built with great care. The streets had drains to stop rainwater from damaging the soft mud-brick walls. There were also small tomb chapels with writings about soldiers. This suggests this place might have been the military base, and that changes a lot. In ancient Egypt, when the military showed up, there must have been a reason. So what was it? Protection? Conquest? Control of something important? In the case of this city, it was probably about wine, water, and trade on the edge of the desert. What's even crazier is that we still don't know just how big it was. The team has only uncovered part of it so far. There could be fortifications, warehouses, administrative buildings, or even more religious or royal structures waiting underground. We also don't know what this town was called in ancient times. That name is still buried. But it might be uncovered someday, maybe inside a wall, maybe on a scroll, maybe on another broken jug. One of those already turned out to be a mind-blower. A chunk of a ceramic jar, called an amphora, had a royal seal pressed into it, and that seal bore the name Meredaton. Princess Meredaton wasn't just anyone. She was the eldest daughter of Queen Nefertiti and the older sister of King Tutankhamun. Yes, that's right. Both Nefertiti and King Tut were involved here. All that was about a century before Ramses the Great built one of his temples here. Looks like the city was founded back in the days of another pharaoh, the pharaoh Akhenaten, husband of Queen Nefertiti, father of Princess Meredaton, and future king Tutankhamun. That guy, Akhenaten, was a bit of a wild card. He was the type who really gets weird about one of his interests. He tried to completely change Egypt's religion, forcing everyone to worship the sun disk called Aten instead of the usual deities. He basically told all Egypt that all their mythology was wrong, and from now on, there will be no more Osiris, no more Thoth or Set. Just raw sunlight only, people. That's known in history as the Amarna period. And he went all in, changed his name, built an entirely new capital city called Amarna in the middle of the desert, redesigned temples, rewrote hymns, and even banned traditional religious imagery. Even the art got wild at the time. People started getting elongated heads, belly rolls, and all that humanity and vulnerability carved into stone. It was deliberately weird. He wanted to show the family not as perfect gods, but as human vessels of divine light. Everyone had to awkwardly smile and play along because he was the pharaoh after all. The wackiest part is that after his rule, his son, Tutankhamun, reversed all the sun disk-related stuff. He literally changed his name from Tutankhaten, which means living image of the Aten, the sun disk, to Tutankhamun, which means living image of Amun, one of the great older deities. King Tut brought back the old deities, reopened the temples, and erased as much of Akhenaten's legacy as possible. Looks like his family didn't really like the sun cult after all. Meanwhile, this discovered wine jug shows that the city was probably active, thriving with life during Akhenaten's times. That's huge. Up until now, there was no clear evidence that his radical ideas and projects extended all the way to the north. The jug also shows that vineyards and wine production reached all the way to the north in ancient Egypt. Wine really was a huge deal, worthy of placing a military base here. Princess Meredaton most likely used this jug. Just like with her brother,
She was born into the sun and named after it. Her name, also spelled Meritaten, meant beloved of the Aten. As the eldest daughter of Pharaoh and his queen, born right into the middle of radical religious changes, she was raised to perform the future queen's duties. From her earliest years, she walked in temples alongside her mother Nefertiti, shaking the sistrum in solemn rituals. She was there when Akhenaten established his capital city, Amarna. He clearly loved his family. Meritaten's face was etched into its stone walls more than anyone else. In every temple, in every sacred scene, her figure appears, revered. Things get foggy in history after her father passed away. The throne wobbled. King Tut was very young, only 9 years old when he had to take new duties. Meritaten seemed to have been a brief step between her father and her younger brother. She married someone called Smenkhkare. History isn't even sure who that mysterious man was. Could have been a puppet, a phantom king in a crumbling dynasty. May have even been her brother. Whatever the truth was, these two took power and ruled together for a while. Meritaten got the title of the Great Royal Wife, a title of immense power. But Smenkhkare was a very short-lived ruler. He passed away just in about a year. There are some speculations among historians that Meritaten was the actual ruler, the informal female pharaoh, because her brother was too young. Some theories say that she raised Tutankhamun and became a sort of queen regent, mentoring the child who would be used to restore the old order. But all this is unconfirmed. It's very hard for historians to find information about that time because the Amarna period was later condemned. The successors wanted to wipe away Akhenaten's heresy and everything attached to it. This included Meritaten. So even if she ruled, even if she mothered Tut, they tried to bury her in the sands of history. In any case, perhaps this new uncovered city will tell us more about the mysteries of the Amarna period, one of the most chaotic periods of ancient Egypt. You're digging in Egypt's famous Saqqara necropolis, also known as the ultimate VIP graveyard for pharaohs, when suddenly you find a giant pink door hiding something no one knew existed. Behind this giant stone door, one that wasn't supposed to open, by the way, you find a lost tomb of Egyptian royalty. Alright, history lovers, it's time to buckle up because archaeologists just pulled off something straight out of an Indiana Jones movie. Let's travel all the way to Saqqara, one of Egypt's most mysterious and treasure-packed ancient sites. The star of the show? The prince you've probably never heard of, Prince Userefre, son of King Userkaf. No one important, just, the founder of Egypt's 5th dynasty. No big deal. But the way his tomb was discovered… It all started with a massive door, made of pink granite, no less. But this isn't just a regular stone slab. This thing is about 14 to 15 feet tall and 4 feet wide. A giraffe could easily walk through it. This door is also definitely heavier than your neighbor's SUV. But here's the twist. It wasn't a real door. It was a false door, a symbolic gateway meant to allow the spirit of the deceased to pass between the world of the living and the afterlife. Normally, that's where the story ends. After all, false doors are common in tombs. But this one was extra special. You see, false doors were usually made out of limestone, which was pretty common and found everywhere in Egypt. To build one out of red or pink granite, people had to bring these rocks from a quarry located 400 miles away. And you can bet this wasn't a cheap trip. According to Egyptologists, this is the first time a false door of this size and material has ever been found in Egypt, making it a totally unique piece of architecture. Aside from being super expensive, this one had a surprise behind it too. When the team of researchers investigated further, they realized that this false door actually hid a real entrance. And what did it lead to? A hidden tomb, packed with statues, relics, and secrets from over 4,000 years ago. The tomb belongs to Prince Userefre, but you can call him Wasar-Efra or Wasar-Efra too. Despite being totally erased from history, this fella was no minor noble.
The hieroglyphs on the pink granite door listed him as the hereditary prince, governor of Buto and Nekeb, royal scribe, minister, judge, and priest of chance. Phew! He was like the ancient Egyptian version of Daenerys Targaryen. These inscriptions not only identify his political and religious roles, but also suggest he held significant power in Lower and Upper Egypt, bridging both regions through his titles. One title in particular, the priest of Sekher, links him to the deity of the necropolis, the one with the falcon head. This god was the patron of the living and god of the dead at the same time. So I guess the Forgotten Prince was sort of a big deal, considering that his tomb was placed in such a prestigious location within Saqqara. What's even more mysterious is that Prince Userefre doesn't appear in official king lists or royal family trees, which makes us wonder if he passed away before he could rule, or if his legacy was deliberately erased in one of ancient Egypt's classic political dramas. Some scholars now believe his erasure might be connected with shifting religious or political power struggles during the early 5th dynasty, especially as his father Userkaf was reshaping Egypt's religious order. And speaking of his father, King Userkaf was a total game changer. He wasn't just the founder of the 5th dynasty, he also kicked off a religious revolution by promoting the sun god Ra over older deities. That's right, Userkaf built the very first sun temple at Abu Sir, setting off a dynasty-wide obsession with solar worship. After Userkaf wrapped up his short but revolutionary reign, a whole lineup of pharaohs took the stage. Sahure, Neferirkare, Nusere-Ini, basically the boy band of the 5th dynasty. And these guys were all about two things: building pyramids and making money. They weren't just stacking stones, they were expanding Egypt's influence, opening up trade routes to far-off lands, and blinging out their temples like it was nobody's business. Back in the tomb, things got even cooler. There was a beautiful red granite offering table covered with inscriptions detailing ritual foods, like an eternal menu for the afterlife, because they believed the deceased could magically eat this food. Fun fact, it was the funerary priests and their families that actually ate the food. There were also pottery shards, amulets, and painted walls, but the real showstoppers were the statues. And this is exactly where things get weird, in a good way. The team found statues of King Djoser, the guy who built Egypt's first pyramid, his wife, and their 10 daughters, inside Prince Userefre's tomb. Hold up, Djoser lived a few centuries before Userkaf, so what were his statues doing there? Turns out, scientists don't really know. These statues were built during the reign of King Djoser himself and probably belonged to that first ever built pyramid. Experts believe these statues were probably relocated during the 26th dynasty, thousands of years after Djoser, maybe to protect them from destruction, or maybe because they were still venerated. Basically, ancient Egyptians were hoarders, but classy ones. Scientists also know for a fact that some engravings and statues found there were made way later, which means that this tomb probably turned into a deposit for fancy stuff. Or maybe this was just really ancient interior decorating. Anyway, that wasn't all. There was another pink granite entrance on the eastern side of the tomb, with inscriptions linking back to King Neferirkare, another 5th dynasty pharaoh who also tried to build his own pyramid, but failed. And near this second entrance, archaeologists found something never seen before in Saqqara: a set of 13 pink granite statues, all sitting in a row on a high-backed bench, like they were waiting at the DMV of the afterlife. Some had elevated heads, probably representing the prince's wives, while others were missing their heads entirely. One black granite statue was found upside down. Maybe it had taken a tumble sometime during the tomb's long, quiet centuries underground. According to archaeologists, the positioning and head shapes suggest that these statues followed a strict social hierarchy, with the central figures likely representing higher status individuals, while the headless ones might indicate unfinished work or later vandalism. And speaking of black granite statues, another one was found standing proudly inside the tomb. Based on its design and inscriptions, it looks like it was placed there during the 26th dynasty, the same time those Djoser statues were probably moved in. This suggests the tomb didn't just sit abandoned, it was reused, adapted, and maybe even honored by later generations. And by the way, black granite was associated with Osiris, the god of the underworld, during the late period, which means that this statue's presence is a clue that the tomb was a ritual space long after the prince's death. All of this, giant granite doors, surprise statues, reused tombs, adds up to a truly thrilling find. Prince Userefre may not be a household name yet, but his tomb is now one of the most fascinating ever found in Saqqara. It tells a story not just of the Old Kingdom, but of how ancient Egyptians kept connecting to their past, even thousands of years later. So, what does it all mean? Why hide a tomb behind a fake door? Why pack it with statues from different eras? And who exactly was Prince Userefre? These are the kinds of mysteries that keep archaeologists digging and keep the rest of us fascinated. In the end, this discovery isn't just about one tomb, it's about how much is still waiting beneath the sands of Egypt. As more gets uncovered, we're reminded again and again that ancient history isn't gone. It's just sleeping behind massive pink granite doors.
Most people know that pyramids were built as grand tombs for the pharaohs, designed to ensure they had a smooth journey to the afterlife. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for instance, was constructed for the pharaoh Khufu. But what most people don't know is that this whole pyramid building trend started right here with the step pyramid of Djoser about 4,700 years ago. This massive structure was built for Pharaoh Djoser, a ruler from Egypt's 3rd dynasty. It rises 7 layers high above the ground and stands about 200 feet tall. We think of it today as a phenomenal architectural project, but for ancient Egyptians, the step pyramid of Djoser turned out to be more like a massive experiment, a trial run, if you will, to perfect their building skills before they moved on to even more ambitious pyramids. Reaching new heights is super exciting, but the real mystery is what is going on below the ground. In this pyramid's underground labyrinth, there is a network of tunnels stretching about 3.5 miles long, and some researchers believe these tunnels might have been part of a sophisticated water system that could completely change what we think about pyramid construction. Let's talk about this massive complex located in Saqqara. Surrounding the pyramid, there's what's known as a dry moat, a continuous trench that is up to 164 feet wide and almost 2 miles long. It forms a sort of rectangular shape around the pyramid. This trench has an average depth of about 65 feet. Now, if you were to add up all the earth and rock they dug out to create this moat, it would be about 10 times the volume of the step pyramid itself. For the longest time, people just assumed this trench was nothing more than a huge quarry, a place where they dug up stone and clay to build the step pyramid. Makes sense, right? But when you take a closer look, it doesn't add up. The trench is too narrow and deep to be practical for mining, and its layout doesn't match anything we know about ancient Egyptian quarrying methods. Plus, some sections of the trench are actually covered with a rocky ceiling, which would have made it nearly impossible to use as a quarry. Another theory suggests that the dry moat had some kind of spiritual significance. Maybe it was a sacred place, where souls of nobles gathered to serve the late king in the afterlife. There are even niches in the walls that work as a hint at this spiritual function. But most researchers believe that this purpose likely developed much later, long after the complex was built for Djoser. So, what was the moat really designed for? In 2020, a researcher came up with a pretty intriguing idea. It is possible that this trench was actually designed to collect and manage water, especially after heavy rainfalls. Now, that makes sense when you consider the location. The moat sits in an area that could easily have been flooded by runoff water from nearby plains. This could also explain why the trench wasn't used for new graves until much later when the climate became drier and less prone to flooding. The story becomes even more intriguing as this trench appears to be part of a larger, more complex hydraulic system within the Djoser complex. It is like the trench has several compartments, carefully carved out of the rock and connected by tunnels. These compartments likely served as a part of a water treatment system, where water would flow from one compartment to the next, getting cleaner as it moved along. Now, here is where things start to tie into the pyramid itself. The Djoser complex has a series of underground shafts, and some researchers think that water from the moat's deep trench might have been used to power a hydraulic lift system, and this giant water-powered elevator could have been used to raise the heavy stones needed to build the pyramid. It worked like a volcano, but instead of lava, water did the heavy lifting. Imagine a big deep hole in the ground at the center of the pyramid site. Inside this hole, there was a huge wooden platform, kind of like a giant raft that could move up and down. When the workers wanted to lift a heavy stone, they would fill the hole with water. As the water rose, the wooden platform started to float up, carrying the stone with it, almost like a giant water-powered elevator. When the stone reached the right height, the workers slid it off the platform and onto the pyramid. The idea is that water from the deep trench, after being cleaned and filtered, would flow into these shafts. A massive float, possibly made of wood, would then rise as the water filled the shaft, lifting the stones up to where they were needed for construction. Once the stone was in place, they'd let the water out, lowering the platform back down to the bottom, ready to lift the next stone. This fancy hydraulic lift system could have been a game changer, making the whole building process a lot faster and more efficient without using a lot of workforce. It is like the ancient Egyptians were already embracing the whole idea of work smarter, not harder. But of course, not everyone is on board with this theory. Some experts argue that the area where the step pyramid of Djoser was built couldn't have held enough water from occasional rains to maintain such a fancy hydraulic system. The main theory suggests that, in the past, there might have been some kind of lake nearby that would have filled up after a period of rain, and this lake could have supplied water to the complex's hydraulic system. But there is no mention of such a lake in any ancient Egyptian writings, so it might be more of a what-if situation than a reality. And then there's the issue of the hard work itself. Remember when I said this method could have allowed the ancient builders to raise stones with far less effort? Well, that might not be entirely true. According to some experts, just building this hydraulic device would have required a lot more heavy work than simply moving the stone blocks using good old-fashioned manpower. And let's not forget, the step pyramid of Djoser is like a baby pyramid compared to those that came later. The stones used for Djoser's pyramid weighed, on average, about 660 pounds each, which is nothing compared to the more than 2.5-ton blocks used later for the pyramid of Chephren. If this cool water lift theory gets completely ruled out, we still need to explain how this pyramid was built in the first place. To answer that, we need to rewind a bit and talk about the original plans. See, before Djoser's tomb became a pyramid, the idea was to construct a simple mastaba. This type of tomb was pretty common in earlier periods, a flat-roofed, rectangular structure with sloping sides. But after the original mastaba was finished, they decided to expand it a bit by adding more layers on top. And then they added even more layers, until the construction reached 6 distinctive steps, each one smaller than the previous. And they probably did all this by raising those heavy stones using ramps, not a water-powered elevator. There is still so much we don't know about the step pyramid of Djoser. More research is definitely needed to fully understand how this system worked, or if it even existed at all. But the idea of using water to help build the pyramid adds a whole new layer to our understanding of ancient Egyptian engineering. It's a powerful reminder of just how clever and resourceful those builders were, using the natural landscape and the power of water to create one of the most iconic monuments in history.
What is a boat doing in the middle of a desert? You would expect to find a seagoing vessel closer to shore. This is the question archaeologists have been asking for decades. In 1988, there was a storm near one of the most important archaeological sites in ancient Egypt. A wooden structure emerged from the sand. It was hollowed out by termites. Scientists were determined to solve its mystery. In 2000, they began excavating the site near Abydos, Abydos. An American team of experts soon discovered a boat that was 70 feet long, and it wasn't alone. In total, there were 14 boats neatly resting next to each other. It was impossible to completely dig out the boats because of their poor condition. Luckily, the wood was preserved enough to get a sample. Analyses revealed that the boats were around 5,000 years old, the oldest fleet in human history to this date. The time of their construction predates the pyramids at Giza by half a millennium. Each ship of the fleet rested in a vault that matched its dimensions. The room was roughly a third of the size of a tennis court. It had mud brick walls that featured more than 120 drawings of boats. Ancient Egyptians incised them on whitewashed walls that were excellently preserved. Scientists have known about these mysterious chambers for well over a century. 1901, 1902. A British archaeologist, Arthur Weigel, stumbled upon a strange structure west of the River Nile. His team caught a glimpse of the interior walls. Sadly, a section of the roof collapsed, so they had to call off further exploration. Researchers abandoned the site, but its location remained on the maps. The boat's position first led scientists to think that they rested on a bank of the mighty Nile. But there was a problem with this theory. Today, the river flows almost 7 miles west of Abydos. Further studies of the surrounding terrain showed the Nile didn't change its course throughout history. Also, if the boats floated near a dock, they would be in unstable positions. The 14 vessels at Abydos were perfectly parallel to each other. There was only one conclusion possible. Someone had deliberately placed them like that. They must have gone through a lot of effort. Each boat had enough room for up to 30 rowers. These vessels could really float. They weren't models, but scholars still don't know if they actually sailed any body of water in ancient Egypt. This doesn't diminish the importance of the find. Previously, archaeologists found only small-scale models. In King Tut's tomb alone, there were 35 boat models. For a long time, these figurines were the only clues as to how ancient Egyptian vessels looked like. The boat's design confirms that they were the real deal. They are the earliest surviving examples of something called built boats. Ancient people constructed primitive vessels by hollowing out large tree trunks. The alternative was reed that was tied together to form a raft. The boats at Abydos had planks tied together. This was a major breakthrough in shipbuilding. During their lifetime, the boats must have seemed impressive. Timber was a valuable commodity at the time. There was no wood in the desert. Cedar had to be imported from Lebanon. The only person who could afford such luxury was the pharaoh. Studying the area around the ancient fleet provided more answers. Scientists discovered a mud brick structure where Egyptians worshipped the pharaoh. Its approximate date of construction matches that of the wooden boats. The same bricks out of which this building was made were used to encase the fleet. At the time of their construction, the rooms they were stored in had a ceiling. That's the section that archaeologists stumbled upon in the early 20th century. Just like mummies and coffins, these marvelous ships rested inside splendid vaults. The exterior of these rooms was also impressive. The outer walls originally had a plaster of white limestone. It reflected sunlight. In the desert sun, the structure housing the boats must have shone from miles away. Ancient Egyptian builders used the same technique to cover the pyramids 500 years later. Today, their surface looks jagged, but it wasn't always like this. When they were constructed, the pyramids had a top layer of fine white limestone. Their surface was smooth and it gleamed in the sunlight. Instead of stairs, the outer layer of the pyramids was more of a sleek ramp. Archaeologists were left with one final question. Which pharaoh owned the fleet? The answer lay just a mile from the site. This is where the tomb of a pharaoh from the 5th dynasty rested, King Senwosret III. Its time and style of construction matched the ones of the chambers with boats. The very end of his rule might explain how the boats ended up in the middle of the desert. The pharaoh probably passed away in northern Egypt. Then his body was transported down the Nile to Abydos in a marvelous procession of decorated boats. The vessels were later lowered to chambers near the final resting place of their owner. This had a symbolic meaning. In the ancient Egyptians' belief system, ships played a key role. Their supreme deity was Ra, He traveled through the sky during the day in the form of the sun. At nighttime, he sailed through the netherworld in a solar boat. The pharaoh identified himself with Ra. That's why he needed boats in the afterlife. That was the only way to regenerate himself, just as the sun rises every day above the horizon. This belief existed for thousands of years. The more famous Pharaoh Khufu also had a ship. Scientists found it in 1954 next to his pyramid at Giza. It is some 4 centuries younger than the fleet at Abydos, but Khufu's ship was almost 2 times longer. The Great Pyramid of Giza and King Tut's tomb are some of the most famous archaeological finds in Egypt. But there are many more secrets hiding beneath the endless sands of the Sahara Desert. Recently, 2020, archaeologists found a lost city there. They have labeled it as the most important discovery since King Tut's tomb, 1922. The city of Aten is some 3,000 years old. Historians hope it will give them a unique insight into the everyday life of ancient Egyptians. The famous archaeologist and Egyptologist Zahi Hawass proclaimed the site a lost golden city. Aten sits some 300 miles south of Egypt's capital, Cairo. It is close to the famous Valley of the Kings. Archaeologists first found sections of mud brick walls that spread out in all directions. They discovered complete rooms with tools of everyday life inside. The research team unearthed a bakery, a residential neighborhood, and an administrative district. They all date back to the time when the Egyptian civilization was the wealthiest in its long history. They were also the first to make objects from iron. In 1911, scientists found a set of iron beads near a village in Lower Egypt, El Gurza. These are the earliest known iron artifacts. The discovery is literally out of this world. Ancient people made them by beating into shape a piece of a meteorite. The 9 beads were once part of an ornate necklace. They are now blackened and corroded, which is perfectly normal for a piece of jewelry that is over 5,000 years old. They consist of an iron-nickel alloy. Researchers were impressed by the skill of ancient jewelers who processed the beads. Their craftsmanship is more impressive when you think that they didn't know the stellar origins of the material. The Great Pyramid of Giza also has a remarkable feature. An international research group investigated the electromagnetic response of the structure to radio waves. They found that the pyramid has the ability to concentrate electromagnetic energy inside it. This occurred inside its chambers as well as under the pyramid's base. It contains an underground, unfinished chamber. It seems that the electromagnetic response is connected with the properties of limestone, the Great Pyramid's main building material. The research results might have a practical application. The way solar cells and nanosensors function could be improved by this remarkable find.
The ancient Indian texts mention beautifully decorated chariots or entire palaces called vimanas that could take off and, in a matter of seconds, fly away as far as space. Some people believe these vimanas only existed in Indian mythology, but it's also possible that they were based on a real technology that had been lost over the centuries. According to the Vedas, ancient Indian religious texts, there was the elephant vimana with several engines and many other types named after animals and birds. There was one for local travel, one for visiting different countries, and one for traveling to the moon and various planets. They could develop a great speed. One vimana had the superpower of invisibility. Another one was shaped like a sphere and was built on the winds produced by Mercury. This vimana was said to generate an enormous ray like the sun and make noise like the storm's thunder. All the vimanas were unbreakable and perfect for attacks on foes. Now, to operate a vimana, you'd need to know a lot of stuff, pretty much like today's airplane pilots. 32 secrets in total. They'd cover the aircraft structure and the secrets of taking off and maneuvering without crashing. That's a good thing. The pilot was also expected to know how to be seen and unseen, how to be hidden, how to be quick, how to manage contractions and expansion, and many other tricks. To hide the flying machine from foes, the pilot was instructed to move to the 8th atmospheric layer above the Earth and use the power of dark solar rays. This instruction might sound a bit weird, but there were others, more realistic ones, which still make sense in modern aeronautics. There are sections of ancient texts on the vimanas that focus on details like flight paths, pilot training, navigation, and even suitable clothes for pilots and recommended food for long flights. There was also a lot of technical detail about the use of heat-absorbing metals, the metals utilized, and melting points. The supporters of the theory that the Vimanas were more than just myths are sure that the ancient Indians would unlikely go into all these details just for a beautiful story. So, the flying palaces might have been real and way ahead of their time, like many other great Indian inventions. Back in the 6th century BCE, an Indian physician named Sushruta basically wrote the original guide to medicine and surgery. They even called him the father of surgery for his work. Sushruta laid down the details on hundreds of medicinal plants and described complex surgical procedures. He gave instructions on nose reconstructions and skin transplants from one part of the body to another. The original method of rhinoplasty, which involved taking a piece of skin from the forehead to reconstruct the nose, is still used today. But back then, it had a slightly different purpose than surprising your followers on social media. Those nose jobs helped out folks who had lost their noses as punishment for crimes or in fights. Now you gotta thank an ancient Indian math prodigy for the invention of zero. It might not seem like a big deal, but without it, we would have no binary system and no computers. People before the 5th century CE were only thinking about some sort of a sign to indicate nothing. The invention made addition, subtraction, and other mathematical operations a whole lot easier. You can see the oldest zero in existence carved in the wall of a temple in Gwalior, India. The Indus Valley Civilization was using rulers in 1500 BCE and earlier. Made from ivory, these rulers were found during excavations in what is present-day Pakistan and northwestern India. They were widely used in architecture with amazing accuracy. They had units corresponding to slightly over 1 inch that were marked with precise subdivisions within 5/1000ths of an inch. The next invention is more of a concept than a physical item. Standardization is all about setting the rules based on a bunch of people, things, or interests. One of its cool applications that we've all gotten used to is standard weights. Whether you're using pounds or kilograms, you need these universal measurements for weight, right? For this, we owe a big shout-out to the merchants from the Indus Valley Civilization who lived around 4,000 years ago. They were measuring everything from food grains to fancy luxury goods using these standardized weights. And their weights had decimal and binary mathematical systems going on. They didn't have high-tech gear, but they pulled off some serious precision using complex calculations and even sand for construction. Their art of standardization made its way to Persia and Central Asia, basically becoming the global weight-watching standard. So if yoga is your go-to exercise, you definitely have a personal reason to appreciate the ancient Indian geniuses. Over 5,000 years ago, during the rule of the Indus-Sarasvati civilization in northern India, yoga was first mentioned in the Vedas. Yoga was refined and shaped over the centuries until it grew into a massive teaching with over 200 sacred writings dedicated to this way of obtaining enlightenment. At the beginning of the current era, yoga got a new trajectory thanks to a Hindu writer who laid down a system of yoga in his text, the Yoga Sutras. It became a whole-body rejuvenation, a life-extending practice with poses that you are still doing on the mat today. Yoga has reached the Western world only in the 19th century, and it caught on like wildfire. Chess, the all-time top game for intellectuals, is also an Indian invention. Its ancestor was called Chaturanga, and it was a strategic board game that started gaining popularity around 3,000 years before the current era. This early Indian version of chess was played by 4 people, not 2, and had 64 squares. Each player had 8 pieces, ranging from pawns to kings, bishops to knights, and there was no standard 6-faced dice. They rolled with an oblong one. Players facing off were actually allies, forming 2 teams based on the direction they sat. Chess, that we know and love today, was first mentioned in ancient Indian literature in a legend. It said that the wife of a villain called Ravana had invented the game to amuse him. Now, the word shampoo comes from the Hindi word, which means to soothe or knead. The substance was invented in India in 1762 and was originally used for head massages, hence the name. The first shampoo was made of natural oils and herbs. British traders fell in love with the idea and brought it back with them to England. It took years for the original head massage oil to evolve into shampoo as we know it today, but it's still an Indian invention. Unlike the ancient Greeks, who wore animal skins, the Indians started cultivating cotton back in the 5th and 4th centuries before the current era. They used cotton threads to produce fabrics that soon became a huge hit in the Mediterranean and beyond. Jute and wool also have their origins in India. Cashmere, the finest and most exclusive type of wool, actually comes from the Kashmir region of India. Buttons that sit proudly on that cashmere cardigan of yours also have ancient Indian origins. Some 5,000 years ago, the Indus Valley civilization started cutting seashells into geometric shapes with tiny holes in them. First, they were just decorations, but then people started using them to fasten clothes. Now, when you think about radio communication pioneers, Marconi's name usually steals the spotlight. He got a Nobel Prize in Physics in 1909 for his groundbreaking radio work. But there's an unsung hero in the radio waves game, and his name is Sir Jagdish Chandra Bose. He spilled the beans on radio communication way back in 1895. He shot an electromagnetic wave across 75 feet at the town hall in Calcutta, and it went through walls, rang a bell, and even set off some gunpowder. Marconi took a page from Bose's book, using his invention, the Mercury Coherer, as a blueprint for his own two-way radio. Bose didn't patent his genius creation, so he only got his credit a century later. Okay, what if I tell you that the extraterrestrials we all imagine as little green men may actually look like very normal Earthlings and chill in Europe? This is the Iberian Peninsula, and people living there are under suspicion. Ooh. Here's the reason. Somehow, parts of the most important artifacts that the Iberian civilization called Treasure of Villena are made of metal that simply can't be found on Earth, because it's metal from a meteorite. Now let's tackle this step by step. This is the artifact itself, and it's composed of 59 different objects. Bowls, bottles, and bracelets. Is there a pattern there with all those bees? In total, the find weighs around 20 pounds, of which 18 pounds are 23.5 karat gold. Now, if you're not a metal specialist, I'll clarify it for you right away. For comparison, 23 karat gold is 95.8% pure gold, so 23.5 karat is even purer. The remaining percentage goes to other metals to help add strength and durability to the precious alloy. There was also silver, iron, and amber in that set. The artifact could have been pretty straightforward, but for these two, let's call them imposters. Look at this wrought iron bracelet and this hollow hemisphere. Can you see that? Those rusty lines on the hemisphere and the overall weird color of the bracelet do stand out, since everything else is made of purest gold. This all started back in 1963, when a researcher noticed a dark leaden metal among the shiny bowls and bottles. The metal was shiny in some areas and covered with a ferrous-looking oxide that was mostly cracked. Now, just so you understand, gold does not usually act this way. Gold is one of the least reactive of all metals, so it won't even tarnish, let alone rust. To figure out where this suspicious iron came from, researchers turned to mass spectrometry, which checks out the mass-to-charge ratio of molecules. Their findings showed that the nickel in the iron is similar to that found in meteoritic iron. Simply put, the bracelet and the hemisphere are of extraterrestrial origin. Ooh. Now, the exact age of the trove is hard to determine, yet it's crucial. We need to know the exact age to see if it coincides with the start of the Iron Age in the Iberian Peninsula. If it does, then no further questions here. But if it doesn't, Well, it's, at the very least, weird, if not suspicious. So there's this three-age system. It comprises the Stone Age, then the Bronze Age, and then the Iron Age. The Stone Age is of no importance here, so let's compare the Bronze and the Iron Ages. The Bronze Age began when it was realized that combining copper and tin produced a material that was more durable than either metal alone. This era was all about major upgrades in tools and weapons, but two standout inventions were writing systems and the wheel. Then came the Iron Age. This time was all about slowly bringing iron into everyday life. Iron was way easier to shape into cool designs than bronze. Now this was a big deal, because iron, especially transformed into steel, provided significant improvements in all aspects of life. Tools became lighter, cheaper, and stronger compared to their bronze equivalents. You get it? Good. So researchers have long debated whether the treasure dates back to the post-Archaic era or the latter part of the Bronze Age. The most recent study claims that those artifacts were created in 1400 to 1200 BCE, and something really doesn't add up. First off, the Iron Age began around 500 years after these artifacts were crafted. Plus, ancient craftsmen couldn't know back then how to work with metals that landed on Earth approximately 1 million years ago. And while the dates are really hard to explain, there is a logical explanation for the craftsmanship. The theory here is that those metal workers simply had access to the fallen meteorite, and thus, they could study it well and discover its properties before using it for decorative purposes. They could have figured it out through trial and error, and once they knew exactly how to work with this extraterrestrial metal, they proceeded to adorn the artifacts with it. Plus, there were the Phoenicians, who contributed to their craftsmanship. Now, it's true that the Iberian people have been processing metal and making pottery long before the Phoenicians settled on the peninsula. But the arrival of new metalworking techniques and the introduction of the potter's wheel enabled them to produce better quality goods much faster than before. So, we figured out the extraterrestrial origins of the Iberian artifacts. But guess what? This area is still under suspicion. The reason for that is the language they spoke. You see, for most modern languages people use today, there will always be some proto-language. Say for Italian, Spanish, and French, it's Latin, hence their similarities. But wait, Iberian was largely spoken where modern Spain is, so why isn't Spanish similar to it? Well, the truth is, no language today is similar to the Iberian. Maybe only the Basque language, but it's because of some similarities found in their numerical systems. Basque is classified as a language isolate, or simply unrelated to any other known languages, and the only language isolate in Europe. The Iberian language is unclassified. While the scripts written in it have been deciphered to various extents, the language itself remains largely unknown. And look at the alphabet the Iberians had. Looks like it doesn't really belong to our planet. But hold up, this one might be a bit of a stretch. When the Phoenicians came to the peninsula, they brought along their alphabet to the Iberians. But honestly, the Iberians probably weren't keen on just copying someone else's writing system, so they tweaked it until it looked completely different. Let's just say they took some inspiration and ran with it. While linguists can guess to some extent how most characters sounded, actually translating the language is still completely impossible. The Iberian language was non-Indo-European and faded away over 2,000 years ago. And there aren't any similar languages left to help us out. Super frustrating, right? Yeah. We got over 2,000 Iberian inscriptions from tombs, coins, potteries, lead plates, and even cave wall carvings. But aside from a handful of words, we're totally in the dark about what they mean. Now, if we could understand their language, we might have learned that they were great thinkers and all, but we can only contemplate the works of art they left. Iberian culture has a lot of amazing stuff made by talented artisans. We're talking about not just metalwork and ceramics, but also detailed sculptures, textiles, jewelry, and other personal bling. But here's the catch. Making all those luxury items depended a lot on a big farming class. At the heart of Iberian society, most folks were involved in farming and taking care of livestock. Depending on where you were, the types of farming varied. For example, up in the north, they were all about growing grains, while down in Valencia, they focused on producing olive oil and other agricultural aspects. In the west, raising animals was the name of the game. Still, we don't have much information about the day-to-day lives of the many people doing this essential work. Yet, on the flip side, we know a lot about the upper class of Iberian society, who control these agricultural resources and hire the artisans. By the 7th century BCE, we start to see a group of Iberian princes who were living the good life, trading with the Phoenicians, and enjoying fancy luxury items. You can spot this elite class in their burial practices. Cremation was the go-to method for funerals among the Iberians, and wealthy individuals were often found in cemeteries with all sorts of lavish goods and funerary sculptures that give us a peek into the fashion and hairstyles of the rich. Interestingly, starting in the 6th century BCE, there was a noticeable drop in the number of recognizable burials, which suggests that these elaborate funeral customs became more exclusive to a small elite. Meanwhile, the fate of the majority, farmers, artisans, soldiers, and laborers, who made up a big chunk of the population, remains a bit of a mystery. It used to be a pretty advanced civilization, but it vanished without a trace. Researchers think it could have been due to some massive earthquake, but so far, we don't know for sure. Stone Age people were grunting cavemen with spears. True or false? Absolutely false. They were gathering around and forming real culture as far as we've discovered. In Turkey, scientists uncovered a 12,000-year-old mystery that's revising history. It's a sophisticated cosmic calendar made out of giant stone temples that may actually be a warning from the stars. We're talking about Gobekli Tepe. This prehistorical site predates even Stonehenge, our classical stone ring circle, by 6,000 years. And it upends why we think Stone Age civilizations emerged and thrived. Here's how this discovery could change our collective history. Around 10,850 BCE, a massive comet, or better yet, a bunch of comet fragments, smashed into Earth. The skies darkened, the temperature dropped, big animals vanished, and it kicked off a mini ice age that lasted over 1,200 years. What's now a place called Gobekli Tepe was home to a group of humans who survived this entire chaotic event. After it happened, they started paying close attention to the sky. As a way of trying to control time a little bit more, they tracked the movements of the sun, the moon, the planets, and comets. This in turn led them to build a huge lunisolar calendar, the first one in the world. Now, if you were to tour around this classic Stone Age monument, you'd see that not all the stone pillars are blank. Some of them have carvings, like this main one with a bunch of V's on it. Turns out there are 365 V's, which scientists believe represent the days of the solar year. One of them, a V hanging on a bird's neck, is thought to mark a solar eclipse. Other pillars have dangerous animals carved on them, like foxes, lions, scorpions, vultures, twisting and crawling up the sides. Unlike typical Stone Age carvings, these weren't of edible animals like deer or sheep. One of the theories is that these drawings were symbolic. Some archaeologists believe they reflect the fears and chaos this civilization had lived through, a kind of collective attempt to make sense of a terrifying and unpredictable world. Archaeologist Danielle Stordour has highlighted the images of vultures, saying they represent the people who passed away. In some ancient cultures, vultures were believed to carry the souls of the deceased into another realm. She's seen similar symbols in ancient sites nearby. To understand why this all makes sense, we need to dig deeper into the real purpose of this site. Gobekli Tepe was discovered in 1994 by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt. who realized that the hill in southeastern Turkey wasn't just another Neolithic mound. Underneath it, his team uncovered massive stone circles supported by pillars weighing up to 20 tons. Radiocarbon dating puts the site at around 12,000 years old, making it the oldest known ceremonial structure ever built. I mean, it predates the Egyptian pyramids by over 7,000 years. This discovery shocked the archaeological world. At the end of the Ice Age, humans were supposed to be nomadic, surviving off wild plants and animals, not building sacred complexes with symbolic art, and giving birth to what we now classify as civilization. We usually think civilization starts with farming, then villages, then crops. But this site suggests something more surprising. Early humans may have come together not to grow food, but to worship. Schmidt found no signs of homes, hearths, or permanent settlement, just stuff used for rituals and gatherings. This has led researchers to believe that spirituality and communal rituals came first and that farming followed. Because to build something this massive, you'd need hundreds of people working together, which in turn would have sparked the need for food, organization, and social structure. In other words, the temple came first, then the village, then the farm. Now, Gobekli Tepe isn't just stirring debate because it's old. It's because it seems too advanced for its time, and that's where the more controversial theories start to emerge. Some researchers believe the builders of Gobekli Tepe weren't simply primitive hunter-gatherers experimenting with stone tools. They may have been the inheritors of ancient knowledge, remnants of a much older civilization that existed before the end of the last ice age. This idea ties into the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, a theory that a comet struck Earth around 10,850 years ago, triggering a sudden and catastrophic climate shift. According to this view, the survivors of that event passed down their knowledge through symbolism, architecture, and oral tradition. And Gobekli Tepe could be one of the earliest attempts to preserve that memory. Now, if that's true, then the carvings at this site, especially the animal symbols on the pillars, aren't just decorative. They could be astronomical codes, tracking constellations and celestial events. But one pillar might hold the biggest secret of all. It's called the Vulture Stone, and it's freaking archaeologists out. On it, you'll find a strange combination of figures: a headless man, birds, and a scorpion. To the untrained eye, it might seem random, but some researchers believe these are ancient representations of constellations, like Scorpius among them, and that the headless man symbolizes a mass extinction event. Some even argue that this is the oldest known record of a comet impact, the one that triggered the Younger Dryas. And if you're wondering who this older lost civilization might have been, they are called Atlantis, or more neutrally, Civilization X. Theorists like Graham Hancock suggest that this advanced culture, destroyed in the chaos of the comet impact, passed fragments of its knowledge to survivors around the globe. In that case, Gobekli Tepe wasn't the start of civilization, it was the restart. Now, back to the stones. Pillar 43 may look like a celestial calendar at first, but when archaeologists recreated the sky patterns encoded in its carvings, they found a precise snapshot of the sky dating back over 13,000 years. It appears to show a meteor shower, a flood, and humanity's tragic end, aka the Headless Man. A snake rising from the ground might even symbolize tidal waves or destruction coming from below. But the story doesn't end there. Pillar seems to expand on the same disaster, the one they called the Terror of the Sky. You might see animals fleeing, waves, fire raining down. It paints a vivid picture of the meteor shower. But wait! While Pillars 43 and 56 may encode memories of a past catastrophe, Pillar 18 might be a forecast. That stone zooms in on the Aquarius constellation. If this sounds familiar, maybe it's from the phase Age of Aquarius, which is the age we're living in now. Some enthusiasts believe this may be a warning for us, and may be telling us that a similar meteor shower will hit Earth and thus you and me and us. I mean, chills! But hey, that's the kind of mystery that makes Gobekli Tepe so captivating. Today, archaeologists know that Gobekli Tepe was part of a much larger sacred complex, now known as Tash Tepler, a network of ancient sites across the region, each with its own secrets and structures, but connected by shared patterns and motifs. In 2019, excavations began at this sister site, just 40 miles from Gobekli Tepe, known as Karahan Tepe. And here's the twist. Some researchers believe Karahan Tepe might be even older. Unlike Gobekli Tepe, which appears to have been primarily ceremonial, Karahan Tepe has signs of domestic structures like walls, tools, and perhaps even homes. And that changes everything. Because whether these sites were the work of highly sophisticated hunter-gatherers or survivors carrying the fragments of a lost pre-Ice Age civilization, one thing becomes clear. Our ancestors weren't just surviving. They were planning, tracking, and predicting. They were far more capable, curious, and connected to the universe than we ever gave them credit for. Hey, I bet you didn't know that trees used to grow in the middle of Egypt's barren, sun-roasted Sinai desert. It's true. If you can't picture it, I don't blame you. But archaeologists have recently stumbled upon a tree-lined boulevard. Yep, an actual green avenue leading to a massive ancient fortress. No, this isn't some mirage or an overactive imagination, although I do have one. But it's turning our ideas of ancient Egyptian desert life upside down. Let's rewind a bit. The site in question is called Tel Abu Saifi, located in the northern part of the Sinai Peninsula. For a long time, it was known as a dusty archaeological footnote, the home of ruins from the Ptolemaic and Roman periods. You know, the era after Alexander the Great swaggered through Egypt and the Roman Empire called dibs. But recently, Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities decided to give it a fresh dig. And what they found out turned to be more than just a forgotten outpost. We're talking about a full-on military fortress with defensive trenches, paved roads, lime kilns, barracks for soldiers, and even room for their families. A whole bunch of living quarters right in the middle of a desert doesn't feel very homey until you remember our star, the unexpected Green Avenue. This road was over 300 feet long and 36 feet wide, as long as an American football field, paved with limestone slabs and lined with more than 500 clay planting pits. These weren't for show. They held actual trees, creating a shaded tree-line entrance straight to the fortress. Imagine walking through that, the sun blazing overhead, and suddenly, blessed shade. Ooh. Now, that's not just a grand entrance, that's an ancient red carpet, or maybe a green one. But this wasn't about curb appeal. The existence of hundreds of trees in a desert landscape over 2,000 years ago tells us something big. You see, the Ptolemaic Egyptians weren't simply good at building monuments. They were also masters of water management. In a place where rainfall is rarer than a selfie with a pharaoh, they somehow found a way to grow rows of trees. Now, let that sink in. To irrigate that many trees in a desert, they must have had a sophisticated irrigation or water transport system, something capable of moving and distributing water efficiently in this harsh climate. Maybe they channeled groundwater, or maybe they captured seasonal rain, or maybe ancient sprinkler systems. Okay, maybe not that fancy. But still, it's clear they were ahead of their time. Here's the thing, we already know the Egyptians mastered water control. They harnessed the Nile with ditches and canals to feed distant fields. So irrigation wasn't exactly a mystery to them. They had the skills and the knowledge. And sure, scientists still debate what the Sinai climate was like 2,000 years ago. But many believe it may have once been greener. After all, take one look at those dramatic mountains and rocky landscapes, shaped and sculpted as if by brute force of ancient rivers. And it's hard not to think that water once played a bigger role out there. Plus, archaeologists have found tons of evidence showing that Ptolemaic Egyptians cultivated fruits, vines, and trees on a large scale. In other words, Growing a forest in a desert might feel wild to us, but to them, it was just another Tuesday. And now, this green avenue is making archaeologists wonder, what if similar irrigation systems were used elsewhere, say for transporting the enormous stones used to build the pyramids? There's already a theory that ancient rivers or human-made canals helped move those stones. And the Thutmose II discovery? Well, it might just be the missing puzzle piece. This isn't just a dream. Back then, rivers were like highways, power grids, and cargo trains of the ancient world, all rolled into one. Egyptians used them for everything: irrigating crops, trading goods, powering industry, and even mobilizing for war. If you were doing something important, odds are it involved a river. But wait, it gets even better. Excavations revealed deep defensive trenches, like ancient moats, dug more than 6 feet deep around the fortress. Those weren't just muddy ditches. They were part of an elaborate defense system designed to be filled or bridged to control access. Think of it as ancient Egypt's version of a retractable security gate, minus the hydraulics. And while the trenches were keeping intruders out, life inside the fortress was bustling. Remember how we said archaeologists had found military housing units? It turns out soldiers might have lived there with their families. So this wasn't just a barracks. It was a thriving community, with meals, routines, kids playing, and probably a whole lot of ancient gossip flying around the dinner table. In addition to all the military stuff, researchers found 4 massive lime kilns used to produce quicklime, an essential ingredient for making construction mortar. These kilns are a big deal because they suggest that during the later Roman period, Thutmose II turned into an industrial hub. It was like the Home Depot of ancient Egypt, churning out materials to build and repair buildings. But here's where the plot thickens. Underneath all of this, beneath the roads, the trenches, the kilns, archaeologists found the corners of an even older structure, a mystery building. Could it be the remains of a third, much older fortress? Or an ancient cemetery or lost city? Nobody knows yet, but one thing's clear: this story isn't over. Honestly, this might be the coolest archaeological cliffhanger of the decade. So, what does this all mean? Well, for starters, it challenges everything we assumed about desert life in ancient Egypt. For the longest time, deserts were thought of as natural barriers, dry, deadly, and empty. But this find suggests that the desert might have once been green and full of life, not because the climate was dramatically different, but because the Egyptians were incredibly good at bending the environment to their will. They didn't just survive in the desert, they transformed it. It also adds fuel to the fire in the age-old debate about ancient Egyptian tech. If they could build a fortress with tree-lined roads, moats, irrigation, and industry in the middle of the Sinai, is it really such a stretch to imagine they could engineer water channels to move pyramid stones? Forget the Ancient Aliens TV show. Sure, it's entertaining, I'll give you that, but it makes us forget something crucial. Those people were brilliant. A lot of what we call modern technology is recycled ancient ingenuity. And who knows how much knowledge we've lost over time. Meanwhile, the dig continues. Scientists are now mapping the entire Thutmose II site, trying to piece together how all the structures connect. Some want to analyze soil samples to find traces of old tree roots and maybe even figure out what kinds of trees once grew there. Imagine if they were date palms. We might be looking at the world's oldest snack lane. You already know that the implications of the discoveries don't stop with history books, right? This kind of discovery has modern relevance too. Our world is going through a lot of change, with crazy weather and huge heat waves. So maybe we should be asking, what can we learn from ancient civilizations that once made the desert bloom? If nothing else, Thutmose II reminds us that the ancient Egyptians were more than just pharaohs, pyramids, and mummies. They were visionary planners, eco-architects, and straight-up problem solvers. They didn't wait for nature to hand them what they needed, they engineered it. And thanks to discoveries like this, we're getting a clearer picture of just how advanced and, frankly, how cool ancient Egyptian civilization really was. So next time someone tells you deserts are just empty wastelands, you can hit them with this fun fact. Over 2,000 years ago, in the heart of the Sinai Desert, There was a fortress with a tree-lined avenue, moats, military housing, an industrial center, and even a secret underground structure. Take that, sand dunes! Who knows what else is still buried out there, waiting to rewrite history?